It was a bright and sunny day at the Surf Beach in California, a popular destination for locals and tourists alike. It was a long stretch of golden sand, dotted with brightly colored umbrellas and beach chairs. The water was a vibrant turquoise blue, and the waves were gentle and inviting. There were several volleyball nets set up on the beach, and people could be seen playing games and lounging in the sun. Music played from portable speakers, adding to the festive atmosphere. The beach was flanked by tall cliffs on either side, creating a natural amphitheater that amplified the sounds of the waves and the laughter of the people on the beach. The cliffs were covered in lush green foliage, providing a striking contrast to the golden sand and blue water. At one end of the beach, there was a small harbor where boats could be rented for fishing or sightseeing. At the other end, there was a rocky outcropping that jutted out into the water, providing a popular spot for cliff jumping. There were several amenities on the beach, including restrooms, showers, and a snack bar. Lifeguards were on duty throughout the day, keeping watch over the water and ensuring the safety of the swimmers. A group of teenagers had decided to go for a swim in the ocean because it was a hot summer day and they wanted to cool off in the water. They had spent the morning playing beach volleyball and lounging in the sun, and as the day wore on, the heat became almost unbearable. Among them was 17-year-old Alex, who had always loved the water and was an excellent swimmer. The water looked inviting, and they could see other people swimming and splashing around, so they decided to join in on the fun. They had heard rumors that there were sometimes sharks in the area, but they didn't think much of it. After all, they had been swimming in the ocean before and had never encountered any dangerous predators. As they waded into the water, the teenagers felt the coolness of the ocean wash over them. They laughed and joked, splashing each other and enjoying the freedom of being in the water. They swam out further and further, enjoying the waves and the sun on their skin. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and the water seemed calm and peaceful. Then suddenly, Alex felt a sharp pain in his leg. He looked down to see a massive great white shark, its razor-sharp teeth sinking deep into his flesh. The force of the attack knocked him off his feet, and he struggled to stay afloat as the shark dragged him underwater. The group of teenagers witnessed a horrifying and violent attack as the shark's teeth sank deep into Alex's flesh, causing him to cry out in pain. The other teenagers screamed and tried to swim away, but the shark was too fast. As the shark circled back around for a second attack, its jaws gaped wide open as it prepared to strike again. This time, it bit down hard on Alex's torso, severing his body in two. The teenagers saw the full extent of the damage it had caused as their friend's lifeless body floated to the surface, torn apart and mangled beyond recognition. They watched in horror as the shark continued to thrash around, hungry for more. The other teenagers in the group realized they were in danger and quickly began to swim away as fast as they could. The water around them was turned up, making it difficult to see where the shark was, but they knew they had to get as far away as possible. As they swam, the teenagers could hear the shark's powerful thrashing in the water behind them, which only spurred them to swim faster. They knew they couldn't outrun the shark, but they hoped to create enough distance between themselves and the shark to give them a chance to reach the shore. Despite the terror and panic they felt, the teenagers remained focused on swimming and tried not to let their fear get the best of them. They swam in a zigzag pattern, hoping to make it harder for the shark to follow them. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the group reached the shore. They staggered out of the water, panting and trembling with fear, but relieved to have escaped with their lives. They looked out at the water, watching as the shark continued to thrash around, its massive body visible in the churning waves. The attack of the great white shark sent shock waves through the beach, and people quickly realized that they were in danger. As the other teenagers in the water tried to swim away, people on the shore began to scream and shout, urging them to come back to the beach. The beach quickly became a scene of chaos as people scrambled to get out of the water and call for help. As news of the attack spread, more and more people on the beach began to panic. Parents gathered their children and ran for safety, while others called for help and tried to get as far away from the water as possible. Emergency services arrived on the scene quickly including ambulances, police, and rescue teams. They quickly assessed the situation and began to take action to control the situation and help the victims. Lifeguards were the first to respond, jumping into the water to try to reach Alex and the other teenagers who had been swimming with him. They could see the water turning red with blood, and they knew they were dealing with a serious situation. Paramedics and ambulance crews arrived next, and they immediately began to tend to Alex. Despite their best efforts, however, they could not save him, as he had been bitten in half by the shark. The police arrived on the scene soon after, and they began to cordon off the area, preventing people from getting too close to the water. They also searched the surrounding area for any signs of the great white shark, hoping to capture or kill it before it could attack anyone else. Meanwhile, rescue helicopters circled overhead, searching the water for any signs of the shark. They used thermal imaging cameras to try to detect the shark's body heat, but they were unable to locate it. As news of the attack spread, more and more emergency services arrived on the scene, including Marine Patrol units and Coast Guard vessels. They scoured the water for any signs of the shark. The beach became crowded with onlookers, and many people were outraged that such a dangerous predator could be lurking so close to shore, and called for increased measures to control shark populations. For the family and friends of Alex, there was no comfort to be found in the aftermath of the attack. They were left to grieve the loss of a young life cut tragically short, and to wonder how something so horrific could happen to someone so innocent. The memory of that day would haunt them forever, a reminder of the brutal and unpredictable nature of the world we live in. Since he was a child, Anthony was captivated by the ocean's mesmerizing beauty and its fascinating inhabitants. Growing up, he dreamed of exploring the depths of the sea and discovering new species of marine life. As an avid scuba diver, he had traveled to many breathtaking locations across the globe, but the Bahamas spelled a special allure that always drew him back. The waters of the Bahamas were like a shimmering jewel, clear and inviting him to dive in and explore. Anthony was mesmerized by the vibrant coral reefs that burst with colors and the schools of exotic fish that swam in synchronized motion. He had seen enormous manta rays with wingspans that seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see, and gentle nurse sharks gliding through the water with effortless grace. With each dive, Anthony felt he was entering a magical realm where he could escape the noise and chaos of the world above and immerse himself in a world of quiet wonder. The ocean floor was like an otherworldly landscape, dotted with bizarre rock formations and coral towers that rose like spires towards the surface. Anthony felt like he was living in a dream as he swam through the crystal-clear waters, taking in the stunning beauty of the ocean's depths. On a balmy day, the adventurous Anthony decided to embark on a journey to a secluded area of the island that he had never set foot on before. After renting scuba diving equipment, he dove into the emerald green waters that glistened under the sun's rays. As he descended, he felt the cool water engulf him, and he was immediately greeted by a school of tropical fish that swam playfully around him. Anthony was thrilled to explore this new world that lay beneath the surface, and he couldn't wait to discover the hidden gems that awaited him in this remote part of the island. The sunlit water was teeming with a kaleidoscope of vibrant sea creatures, all going about their business. Anthony was in awe of the ever-changing underwater scenery. He watched schools of neon-colored fish darting through the coral, while iridescent jellyfish drifted like slow-moving fireworks. Suddenly, a sinister silhouette appeared, a looming figure in the distance that sent chills down his spine. As the creature approached, he could see the distinctive stripes of the massive predator. It's a 14-foot-long tiger shark, and its eyes were fixed on Anthony. As Anthony gazed into the soulless eyes of the tiger shark, his heart pounded with fear. He felt the cold, inquisitive stare of the shark that had just appeared out of nowhere. Its powerful jaws moved with fluid grace as it circled him, a silent predator in search of its next meal. Anthony's mind raced as he realized the danger he was in. He tried to swim away, but the shark was too quick. Suddenly, the shark lunged forward and clamped its jaws around his leg. Anthony felt a searing pain and was dragged down into the depths of the ocean, struggling to break free. Despite the agonizing pain, Anthony refused to surrender to the jaws of the beast. He wielded his diving knife, lashing out with all his might, but it was futile. The shark's scales were impenetrable to the flimsy blade. With each chomp, the predator's serrated teeth tore through Anthony's flesh, causing him to scream in agony. As time passed, Anthony's strength waned, and the water around him grew crimson with his blood. He struggled to stay conscious as the predator continued to circle, its eyes fixated on its prey. Anthony knew that he needed to act fast before the shark launched its final attack, but with his limbs growing weaker by the second, it seemed that his fate was sealed. In his last-ditch effort to save himself, Anthony made a desperate move to reach the nearby rock formation. As he got closer, he saw the jagged edges of the rocks, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. But his hope was short-lived. The tiger shark quickly caught up to him, circling and thrashing in the water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With all his might, Anthony plunged his diving knife into the shark's eye, and the beast writhed in agony, releasing its grip on him. With a gasp of air, Anthony broke through the surface of the water, but the struggle was far from over. He floated in the open water, desperately trying to signal for help, but no one came. The pain in his leg was agonizing, and he could feel himself slipping away, growing weaker by the second. The sun beat down mercilessly on him, and the salt water burned his wounds, adding to the agony. As time ticked by, his strength waned, and his head grew heavy. Anthony knew that he was fighting a losing battle, and as the sun began to set, he prayed for a miracle. And then, with a final burst of energy, Anthony saw a boat in the distance. He waved his arms frantically, hoping that someone would see him, and they did. The boat raced towards him, and Anthony felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was going to make it after all. But it was not to be. As the boat drew closer, Anthony felt his body begin to shut down. He could feel his heart slowing down and his breath becoming shallower. He knew that he was dying. Anthony never made it to the hospital. His tragic story spread quickly throughout the local news, sending a shiver down the spines of all of those who had ever considered taking a dip in the ocean. It was a haunting reminder that despite the stunning beauty of the Bahamian waters, danger lurked beneath the surface. The unpredictable nature of wild animals was a force to be reckoned with, and even the most experienced divers were not immune to their attacks. Anthony's legacy would be one of caution and respect for the powerful creatures that call the ocean their home. Ayumi stood in awe at the edge of the colossal aquarium, her eyes fixated on the crystal-clear waters that housed the awe-inspiring great white shark she had been observing for more than a year. The shark research facility in Japan was a marvel of modern science, a cutting-edge facility built to study and unravel the mysteries of these formidable apex predators. Ayumi herself was a respected figure in the world of shark research, known far and wide for her unwavering dedication and unparalleled passion in studying these enigmatic creatures. Her heart swelled with excitement as she prepared to embark on yet another day of unraveling the secrets of the deep, eager to immerse herself in the world of the great white shark once again. The facility was buzzing with activity as Ayumi prepared her daily observation session. She put on her diving gear, adjusted her goggles, and took a deep breath. The water was chilly as she descended into the aquarium, surrounded by the tranquil beauty of the underwater world. The great white shark, named Kuro, gracefully glided through the water, its sleek body a picture of power and grace. Ayumi had developed a special bond with Kuro during her time at the research facility. She had spent countless hours observing and documenting Kuro's behavior and had grown to respect and admire the creature's beauty and strength. But today, something was off. Kuro was behaving unusually, swimming faster than usual and bumping into walls of the aquarium with force. Ayumi furrowed her brow in concern as she observed Kuro's erratic behavior. She had never seen Kuro act like this before, and it sent a shiver down her spine. She decided to wrap up her observation and started making her way towards the surface. But before she could reach the top, Kuro suddenly changed direction and started circling her, its large black eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Ayumi's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the danger she was in. She tried to swim away from Kuro, but the shark was relentless in its pursuit. It circled closer and closer, its powerful body cutting through the water with alarming speed. Ayumi's mind raced as she desperately tried to come up with a plan to escape the shark's deadly jaws. Before Ayumi could react, it happened. In a heart-stopping moment, Kuro charged at her with astonishing speed, a blur of sleek muscle and razor-sharp teeth. Ayumi was caught off guard, unable to evade the massive predator in time. With a bone-crushing impact, Kuro slammed into her, pinning her against the unforgiving glass wall of the aquarium. Ayumi's head struck the glass, a sickening thud echoing through the air, and warm blood oozed down her face, mixing with the salt water. The metallic scent of blood seemed to trigger a primal instinct in Kuro, as the once graceful shark now transformed into a frenzied beast. Thrashing violently in the water, jaws snapping dangerously close, Kuro's eyes were filled with a predatory's madness as Ayumi found herself trapped and at the mercy of a creature she had spent her life studying. Desperation surged through Ayumi as she realized the gravity of her situation. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, she kicked and thrashed, desperately trying to free herself from Kuro's jaws. But the shark's immense power was overwhelming. She felt the sharp pain of teeth sinking into her flesh, tearing her limbs apart one by one. Blood clouded the water around her, staining it a murky red, as Kuro tore into her with savage ferocity. Ayumi's screams were muffled by the water, her frantic movements fueled by sheer survival instinct. She fought with every ounce of strength she had left, her body writhing in agony as she refused to succumb to the relentless assault of the creature she had once studied, determined to cling to life until her very last breath. Amidst the chaos, one of the researchers caught wind of the commotion and immediately alerted the rest of the team. A rescue crew scrambled to the scene, but what they encountered left them paralyzed with shock. A ghastly scene before them was one of sheer horror. Ayumi's lifeless body bobbing in the water, her eyes frozen in a look of terror. Kuro was still in a frenzy, thrashing wildly and ripping chunks of flesh from Ayumi's body with a ferocity that defied belief. With a burst of speed, the shark launched itself out of the water and in one fluid motion devoured Ayumi's mangled remains in a gruesome display of savagery. The crew watched in disbelief and horror as the water swirled in a vortex of water, flesh, and blood. And just like that, Kuro disappeared into the depths, dragging Ayumi's tattered corpse behind it. After the initial shock of the attack, the rescue crew managed to gather themselves and quickly drain the aquarium water, revealing the grisly aftermath of Kuro's frenzy. Ayumi's once vibrant body had been brutally torn apart by the shark, and only her head remained, lifeless and rolling at the bottom of the tank. The scene was a gruesome sight to behold, one that left an indelible mark on the minds of all who witnessed it. The once bustling Shark Research Center now stood silent and empty, a solemn monument to the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. Even Kuro, the culprit behind the attack, met a tragic end, his life cut short by the consequences of his deadly actions. Euthanized as a result of the attack, Kuro's fate was a stark reminder of the high stakes and risk involved in the pursuit of scientific knowledge. The loss of Ayumi, A dedicated and passionate shark researcher, left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of those who knew her. Her colleagues were haunted by the gruesome image of her body being torn apart by the very creature she had devoted her life to studying. A reminder of the savage nature of these apex predators. Dr. Marie Sanchez was a marine biologist who had devoted her career to studying the behavior of bull sharks. She had spent countless hours diving in the waters off the coast of Florida, observing and documenting the movements and habits of these magnificent creatures. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive nature and their ability to thrive in both saltwater and freshwater environments, making them a particularly fascinating subject for study. Dr. Sanchez had conducted extensive research on the social behavior and movement patterns of bull sharks. She is particularly interested in their migratory patterns and had used sophisticated tracking devices to follow individual sharks as they move between different habitats. Dr. Sanchez is also interested in the feeding habits of bull sharks, which are known to be opportunistic predators, feeding on a wide variety of prey, including fish, turtles, and even other sharks. She has studied the effects of changing ocean temperatures and other environmental factors on the distribution and abundance of prey species, which in turn can impact the behavior of bull sharks. She had received a grant to study the movements and behavior of bull sharks in the Gulf of Mexico and had been meticulously planning her research for months. The Gulf of Mexico was an ideal location for Dr. Sanchez's research, as it was home to a thriving population of bull sharks. She had carefully selected a site for her dive based on her previous observations of shark activity in the area. On the day of her dive, Dr. Sanchez woke up early and prepared her equipment, checking every detail to ensure that everything was in perfect working order. She reviewed her research plan one final time, going over each step in detail to make sure that she had not overlooked anything. As she set out for the dive site, Dr. Sanchez felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She knew that studying bull sharks could be dangerous, and that even the most experienced researchers could fall victim to a sudden attack. But she was also passionate about her work and believed that the insights she would gain from her research could have a significant impact on our understanding of these fascinating creatures. Once she reached the dive site, Dr. Sanchez wasted no time in getting to work. She carefully donned her wetsuit and diving gear, checking each piece to make sure that it was secure. She then descended into the water, her heart racing with anticipation. For the next few hours, Dr. Sanchez swam through the crystal clear waters of the Gulf of Mexico, observing and documenting the movements and behavior of the bull sharks she encountered. She used underwater cameras and tracking devices to gather data, carefully noting each observation in her research journal. She was carefully observing a group of bull sharks when she noticed one particular shark, a large female, exhibiting some unusual behavior. The shark seemed agitated and was swimming erratically, darting back and forth with alarming speed. Dr. Sanchez became increasingly concerned as the shark began to circle her movements growing more frenzied by the minute. She realized that the shark had likely been disturbed by her presence and was becoming aggressive. Despite her fear, Dr. Sanchez knew that she needed to remain calm and rational if she was going to survive the encounter. She slowly began to swim away from the shark, maintaining eye contact and making slow, deliberate movements to avoid triggering any sudden attacks. Suddenly, the shark lunged towards Dr. Sanchez, its jaws gaping wide. Instinctively, she rolled onto her back and kicked out with her feet, managing to land a blow on the shark's nose. The impact stunned the shark, and she swam away as fast as she could, trying to put as much distance between herself and the shark as possible. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she glanced back over her shoulder, expecting to see the shark hot on her trail. But to her relief, the shark seemed to have been momentarily stunned by the blow to its nose, and it did not pursue her. Instead, it circled around in the water, as if trying to decide whether or not to make another attack. Dr. Sanchez knew that she could not let her guard down, even for a moment. She stayed vigilant, keeping an eye on the shark's movements, as she swam back towards the boat. But just as she was beginning to feel a sense of relief, the shark suddenly lunged towards her once again. This time, Dr. Sanchez did not have the luxury of surprise. She was ready, and she quickly twisted her body to the side, just narrowly avoiding the shark's jaws as they snapped shut in front of her face. She kicked out with her feet, striking the shark's side with all her strength. The impact seemed to stun the shark once again, and it retreated a few feet back, circling around as if weighing its options. Dr. Sanchez knew that she could not keep fending off the shark forever. She needed to make it back to the boat before the shark decided to launch another attack. With adrenaline pumping through her veins, Dr. Sanchez swam as fast as she could, her arms and legs working in perfect synchronization as she propelled herself through the water. The shark pursued her for a few more seconds before finally giving up and disappearing into the depths of the ocean. Dr. Sanchez emerged from the water, gasping for breath, but relieved to have survived the harrowing encounter. She knew that she had narrowly escaped a deadly attack, and she would never forget the lesson she had learned about the power and unpredictability of the creature she studied. The reason for the bull shark's agitation is not immediately clear to Dr. Sanchez, but bull sharks are known for their aggressive nature and unpredictable behavior, and it's possible that the shark was simply reacting to her presence in its territory. However, as Dr. Sanchez later reviewed the footage from her underwater camera, she noticed that the shark had a large fishing hook embedded in its mouth. It was possible that the hook was causing the shark's pain or discomfort, making it more aggressive and unpredictable than usual. Dr. Sanchez knew that the presence of fishing gear and other human activities in the ocean could have a significant impact on the behavior of marine animals. She made a note to investigate further and to share her feelings with local authorities and conservation groups to raise awareness about the need to protect the ocean and its inhabitants. Mason stood on the deck of the fishing vessel, gazing out at the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The water stretched out before him, an endless churning mass of blue and green. The sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Mason loved this time of day. It was when the ocean came alive. He turned to his crew, a group of hardened men with salt-encrusted skin and rough, calloused hands. They were all busy preparing for another night of fishing. The nets were being cleaned and mended, the hooks baited and sorted, and the engines checked for any signs of trouble. Mason was just about to start cleaning the deck when suddenly he felt a massive wave hit the ship. He was thrown off balance, stumbling backwards and tumbling over the railing. He hit the water with a splash, the shock of the cold water taking his breath away. The crew sprang into action, shouting out commands and frantically grabbing ropes and rescue equipment. They had to act quickly to save Mason from the angry ocean, but they soon realized that there was a bigger danger lurking beneath the waves. The crew was frantically preparing to rescue Mason when they saw a large, ominous shape cutting through the water towards him. For a moment, they thought it was a friendly marine animal like a dolphin or whale, but the relief turned into sheer terror when they realized that it was an oceanic white-tipped shark, a predator renowned for its aggression and fearlessness. This was not just any shark, but a killing machine that could detect blood from miles away and could swim at incredible speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Its sharp serrated teeth were designed to rip flesh and crush bones with ease, and its dark, lifeless eyes conveyed a cold, unfeeling hunger for flesh. As the shark closed in on Mason, its movements became more erratic and frenzied, and its large, muscular body seemed to dwarf the helpless fisherman. The water around it churned and frothed with an unsettling energy as the shark prepared to attack. The crew members felt a wave of panic wash over them as they realized that they were facing off against one of the most dangerous predators in the ocean. Mason fought to stay above the water, his muscles burning from the effort as he kicked and thrashed to keep the shark at bay. The oceanic white-tip circled him, its dark, lifeless eyes fixed on his prey, with a chilling intensity. Its sleek body moved with sinuous grace, closing in on Mason with each pass, its sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. Desperate to save their comrade, the crew sprang into action, tossing out a rope and buoy for Mason to grab onto. But as he reached for it, the shark's aggression intensified. With lightning speed, the predator lunged at Mason, its jaws gaping wide, rows of teeth gleaming with a primal hunger. Mason's heart pounded in his chest as he grasped the rope, feeling the rough fibers bite into his hands. But before he could pull himself to safety, the shark struck. Its razor-sharp teeth sank into Mason's leg, tearing through flesh and bone with brutal force. A searing pain shot through him, and he cried out in agony as blood clouded the water around him. The crew shouted in horror, trying to haul Mason aboard as the shark refused to let go. The beast thrashed and shook its massive head, determined to drag Mason under the water. The fisherman's grip on the rope faltered, but he clung on with all his strength, fueled by sheer willpower and the adrenaline coursing through his veins. In a heart-stopping moment, the shark ripped Mason's leg clean off, leaving a gruesome trail of blood in its wake. Mason screamed in agony, a primal scream that brought shivers down the spine of all his crewmates, trying desperately to pull him out of the water. The scene was brutal. The mixture of flesh and blood swirling like a vortex on the churning water left by the shark that plummeted under the water, taking with it a piece of Mason's mangled limbs. The crew was frantically pulling on the rope, trying to save him from the jaws of the vicious predator, but the shark was relentless. From under the water, the shark emerged like a torpedo, and it attacked once more, this time latching onto his remaining leg. Mason screamed in agony as the shark ripped his leg off. He could feel his flesh ripping apart as his other leg was devoured by the frenzied creature, warm blood flowing out of his body, mixing with the salt water around him. The crew was finally able to pull him out of the water, but the damage was already done. Mason was barely conscious, his body in shock from the traumatic experience. The crew tried their best to stop the bleeding from both his mangled legs. The trail of blood from his legs painted the sides of the ship, a grim reminder of the danger that lurked beneath the waves. Mason was airlifted to a hospital in Portugal, where he underwent multiple surgeries. But despite the best efforts of the doctors, he lost both legs. He was left to cope with the physical and emotional scars of the attack, haunted by the memory of the shark that had changed his life forever. The sun shone brilliantly over Lake Nicaragua, casting a golden glow on the water's surface as John and Katie Thomas, a newlywed couple from Ontario, Canada, embarked on their honeymoon adventure. They had chosen Nicaragua for its tropical paradise, seeking a break from the blistering cold of their home country. As they boarded a boat for a tour around the lake, their excitement grew, and they were mesmerized by the breathtaking scenery surrounding them. The lush greenery of the surrounding landscape, the tranquil waters of the lake, and the gentle breeze rustling through the trees created a serene atmosphere. The boat glided smoothly through the water as the couple marveled at the beauty of their surroundings. The boat glided to a halt, and the couple wasted no time in plunging into the mysterious depths of Lake Nicaragua. Their excitement was palpable as they explored the unknown realm beneath the surface, their eyes wide with wonder. The vibrant marine life welcomed them, with colorful fish darting and swirling around them, and coral swaying with otherworldly gardens. But as they ventured deeper, the water grew darker, and an uneasy feeling crept over them. Katie's senses sharpened as she noticed a foreboding shape lurking in the murky abyss below. Her heart skipped a beat as she squinted, trying to discern its identity, but it vanished before her eyes. The tension in the water was palpable, and a sense of mystery hung in the air, sending shivers down their spines. What could it have been? The couple exchanged nervous glances, their curiosity piqued, and a sense of trepidation gnawed at them as they continued to explore the enigmatic underwater world wary of what other secrets it might hold. Little did they know, a colossal bull shark had been silently lurking in the unfathomable depths of the lake, keenly observing their every move. Drawn by the commotion caused by the boat, the predator had been stealthily closing in, patiently biding its time. John, unknowingly separated from Katie, found himself alone in the water, vulnerable and oblivious to the impending danger. With a sudden bone-chilling jolt, a fin sliced through the surface, sending ripples of fear through the air. The massive shark circled closer, its predatory instincts kicking into high gear. Its eyes glimmered with primal fear as it homed in on its prey. The water seemed to thicken with tension as the shark's sleek form glided sinuously through the shadows, circling John with calculated precision. The atmosphere was suffused with palpable suspense as the shark closed the distance, its dark eyes fixed on its unsuspecting target, ready to strike at any moment. The couple's idyllic swim had turned into a heart-stopping battle for survival. As John remained oblivious to the deadly predator lurking just beneath the surface, poised to unleash its primal power. Katie's heart skipped a beat as she realized the danger that her husband was in. She screamed, trying to warn John of the impending attack, but it was too late. In a split second, the bull shark shot out from under the water like a torpedo, its jaws clamping down on John's leg with brutal force. John cried out in agony as the shark thrashed, mauling him in a frenzy. Katie's screams echoed across the lake, alerting their guide, who was still on the boat. He sprang into action, grabbing a spear gun and a knife, and leapt into the water to rescue John. The water turned into a swirling vortex of blood and water as the shark continued its attack, tearing through John's flesh mercilessly. Katie could only watch in horror, paralyzed by fear. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, the guide deftly made his way towards John and the ferocious shark, his mind racing with urgency. As he closed in, he took a deep breath, steadying his nerves, and with one swift motion, thrust his spear gun into the side of the frenzied predator. The shark recoiled, its jaws tightening around John's body, unwilling to let go of its prey. Undeterred, the guide charged forward, his knife glinting menacingly in the murky water. With each frenzied stab, he fought with all his might, plunging his blade into the beast's belly in a desperate bid to free John from its relentless grip. The water boiled with tension as the predator thrashed and writhed, its primal instincts driving it to fight until the bitter end. The struggle was fierce and the outcome uncertain, as the guide fought tooth and nail to save John from certain doom. The water seemed to tremble with the ferocity of the battle, the guide's frantic movements illuminated by the glimmering light of the underwater world. But with each passing second, the guide's efforts paid off, and the shark's grip on John began to loosen. The atmosphere was charged with nail-biting suspense as the guide valiantly battled the predator, fighting for the lives of those in his care. Minutes felt like an eternity as John endured the excruciating pain of the shark's attack. His vision blurred, and he felt his strength fading. Katie's cry spurred the guide to fight even harder, determined to save John. At last, the bull shark succumbed to its injuries, and with one final stab from the guide's knife, it released John and retreated into the depths of the lake. The guide swiftly pulled John's limp body towards the boat, leaving a trail of blood. Katie's emotions were a mix of relief and horror as she saw her husband's mangled leg, but she was grateful he was alive. They rushed to the hospital, where John underwent emergency surgery, resulting in the amputation of his leg to save his life. Despite the tragedy, John and Katie's love for each other only grew stronger. They learned to cherish every moment, living life to the fullest, and never taking anything for granted. As the sun rose over the pristine waters of the Great Barrier Reef, Harvey woke up in his small cabin on board the dive boat. He was excited to begin another day of diving and exploring the wonders of the reef. After a quick breakfast, Harvey joined his fellow divers on the deck to gear up for the first dive. The crew helped him check their equipment, including the scuba tanks, weight belts, and wetsuits. Once everything was set, Harvey and the other divers donned their masks and fins and plunged into the crystal-clear water. As he descended, Harvey felt the cool water envelop him. He gazed around him, marveling at the colorful corals and the schools of tropical fish that darted past him. He spotted a giant manta ray gliding gracefully overhead, and he felt a rush of excitement and awe. For the next hour, Harvey and his dive buddies explored the reef, taking in the breathtaking beauty of this underwater paradise. They spotted a sea turtle lazily swimming by, and Harvey snapped some photos with his underwater camera. He also saw a small octopus hiding in a crevice and a bright orange starfish clinging to a rock. As they ascended back to the surface, Harvey felt a sense of exhilaration and joy. He couldn't wait for the next dive, which was scheduled for later that morning. After a brief break, Harvey and the others geared up again and headed back into the water. This time, they were on a mission to locate a sunken shipwreck that was rumored to be in the area. Using their compasses and underwater maps, they navigated through the reef until they reached the spot where the wreck was supposed to be. At first, they saw nothing but sand and coral. But suddenly, Harvey spotted a dark shape looming in the distance. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed a shipwreck covered in barnacles and surrounded by schools of fish. They swam around the wreck, exploring its nooks and crannies and taking more photos. Harvey was thrilled to have discovered such an amazing sight, and he felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. After the second dive, Harvey and the others returned to the dive boat, tired but happy. They chatted about their experiences and shared their photos, swapping stories and tips. Harvey couldn't believe how lucky he was to have such an incredible job, exploring one of the most beautiful places on Earth. As the sun set over the reef, Harvey settled into his cabin, ready for a good night's sleep. He knew that tomorrow would bring more adventures and more discoveries, and he couldn't wait to see what the reef had in store for him next. Harvey had always been fascinated by shipwrecks, and after yesterday's dive where they discovered one in the Great Barrier Reef, he knew he had to return for a closer look. He planned his dive carefully, ensuring he had all the necessary gear, and set out early in the morning together with his fellow divers. As they approached the shipwreck, he noticed something moving in the distance. At first, he assumed it was just a school of fish, but as he got closer, he realized it was something much bigger. A great white shark. Harvey's heart began to race with excitement and apprehension. He had never encountered great white sharks up close before, and he knew that one wrong move could mean disaster. As Harvey entered the water, he was immediately struck by the sheer size and power of the great white sharks. They glided through the water with an effortless grace, their razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Despite their fearsome reputation, Harvey felt a deep respect and awe for these magnificent creatures. He moved slowly and deliberately, keeping a safe distance while carefully tagging each one with a small device. As the day wore on, Harvey's initial apprehension began to give way to a sense of wonder and exhilaration. He was witnessing one of nature's most incredible spectacles, and he knew that he was privileged to be a part of it. Harvey watched the massive shark circling around the shipwreck. He knew that great whites were common in the area, but he had never encountered one up close before. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if they should abandon the dive, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he convinced the others to press on. They approached the wreck slowly and carefully, keeping a close eye on the shark. As they got closer, Harvey realized that the wreck was home to a whole ecosystem of marine life. Schools of fish swam in and out of the nooks and crannies, and he saw lobsters and crabs scurrying along the ocean floor. He also noticed that the great white shark seemed to be hunting around the wreck, using it as a source of food. Harvey watched in amazement as the shark darted in and out of the shadows, searching for prey. For a few minutes, Harvey forgot his fear and was completely absorbed in the underwater world around him. He was so engrossed in his observations when he felt something shift in his backpack. He tried to adjust it, but in doing so, he accidentally kicked a small rock that had been resting on the ocean floor. The sound of the rock hitting the shipwreck echoed through the water, and suddenly, Harvey heard a loud thrashing sound. He looked around and saw a massive shark heading straight for him. Harvey knew that he had made a mistake. He had accidentally disturbed the shark's peaceful existence and now put himself in grave danger. He tried to swim away as fast as he could, but the shark was too fast. It closed in on him, and Harvey could see its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. The group was horrified as they watched the shark relentlessly attack Harvey, its jaws clamped tightly around his shoulder. Without wasting a second, the group of divers sprang into action. They formed a human chain, trying to distract the shark and draw its attention away from Harvey. Some of them even swam towards the shark and tried to hit it with their diving gear. Another diver signaled for the group to surface and call for help, hoping that a nearby boat or rescue team could come to their aid. However, the shark was too strong and too determined to let go of its prey. It thrashed around violently, causing chaos in the water. The shark was relentless, and it took all of the divers' courage and strength to keep it at bay. They were finally able to pry Harvey free from the shark's jaws, but unfortunately, it was too late. The force of the shark's bite had already decapitated Harvey. Despite the divers' valiant efforts, they were unable to save Harvey from the shark's jaws. As the reality of the situation set in, the divers were left feeling helpless and devastated. They had lost a member of their group, a friend, and a fellow adventurer. They felt a deep sense of grief and sorrow. They knew that the memory of that terrifying encounter with the shark would stay with them forever. They were shocked by the suddenness and violence of the attack, as well as by the realization of how short life was. The sight of their friend being attacked by the shark was something that would haunt them for a long time to come. In the aftermath of the attack, the group was left with renewed respect for the power and unpredictability of nature, as well as a greater appreciation for the fragility of life. They knew that they had been lucky to escape with their lives, and that they would need to be even more careful and vigilant in the future. Sarah and Jake couldn't wait to begin their thrilling expedition into the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of Hawaii. As they set out, the bright sun sparkled on the tranquil water, luring them in with its gentle waves. With their hearts racing and adrenaline pumping, they were ready to uncover the mysteries of the powerful and mysterious sharks that prowled these waters. Every detail of their gear had been meticulously checked and double-checked to ensure their safety, and they were eager to put it to the test. Their eyes locked onto the deep blue sea, searching for any signs of their elusive prey. As they drifted further and further from the safety of the shore, a sense of unease crept over them. They knew the dangers of the deep, but their excitement overpowered any fear. They tried to tag as many sharks as possible, and nothing would stand in their way. As they submerged themselves into the cool, clear water, Sarah's heart pounded excitedly as she spotted the magnificent oceanic white-tipped shark gliding effortlessly through the depths. With a flick of its powerful tail, it disappeared into the blue expanse before them. Without hesitation, Sarah signaled Jake to follow, but Jake signaled Sarah to stop the pursuit. Jake felt unease emanating from the shark's erratic behavior. Jake thought Sarah obliged his instruction to return to the boat, but Sarah was determined to get closer to the shark. The shark's sleek body glistened in the sun's rays, and Sarah was entranced by its deadly grace. The closer she got, the more she could feel the primal energy emanating from the predator. Jake frantically waved his arms, signaling Sarah to return to the boat's safety. But Sarah was entranced by the shark's hypnotic movements, lost in the wild beauty of the predator. Her fascination with the creature proved to be a fatal mistake. The shark launched towards Sarah with lightning-fast speed, its jaws gaping wide. Before she could scream, the predator clamped down hard on her leg, yanking her beneath the water's surface. The force of the bite was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced before. The shark's teeth sliced through her wetsuit, and she could feel the piercing pain in her leg, signaling the beginning of a terrifying fight for survival. As the water grew murky and dark, Sarah struggled to break free from the powerful grip of the shark's jaws. But the predator was too strong, its hold unrelenting. It dragged her deeper and deeper into the abyss, and Sarah knew that her chances of survival were slim at best. Her heart racing, her lungs burning, she fought with all of her might against the relentless force that threatened to claim her life. Jake saw the horrifying scene take place before his eyes. He knew he had to act fast if he intended to save Sarah. Jake's heart pounded with fear and adrenaline as he swam closer to the attack scene. The water was murky and filled with bubbles, making it difficult to see what was happening. He could hear Sarah's muffled screams and knew that time was running out. He pushed himself harder, his arms and legs pumping with all the strength he could muster. As he got closer, he saw the full horror of the situation. The shark's razor-sharp teeth were dug deep into Sarah's mangled leg, and blood was gushing like a river. She fought with all her might, but the predator's grip was too strong. Jake knew he had to act fast, or Sarah would be lost forever. Without hesitation, he lunged at the shark, grabbing its dorsal fin with all his might. The shark thrashed and jerked, trying to shake Jake off, but he held tight. He could feel the immense power of the predator beneath him, and his heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to keep his grip. Finally, with a burst of strength, Jake hit the shark's snout, shocking it with a jolt of pain, forcing its mouth open and freeing Sarah's leg. The shark recoiled and temporarily retreated to the depths of the sea. Jake and Sarah took this opportunity and immediately approached the waiting boat, leaving a trail of blood in their wake. Sarah's leg was gruesome, blood gushing out from the wound and staining the water around them. With every move, Sarah could feel the pain throbbing through her entire body, making lifting her leg hard. But Jake knew he couldn't waste any time. He quickly took out his first aid kit and tied a tourniquet tightly around Sarah's leg, hoping to stem the bleeding. The tension in the air was palpable as the shark continued to circle the boat, waiting for its chance to attack again. Every breath was a struggle, and Sarah could feel her heart pounding against her chest as she struggled to stay conscious. The sound of the shark's fins slicing through the water sent shivers down their spines, and they knew they had to act quickly to return to shore. As they sped back to shore, Sarah felt relieved knowing she had survived a deadly attack by one of the ocean's most notorious predators. She couldn't stop thinking about the shark and how close she came to losing her life. When they arrived back on land, Sarah was rushed to the hospital, receiving medical attention for her wounds. She knew she would never forget the experience and always had a newfound respect for the power of the ocean and its inhabitants. From that day on, Sarah and Jake continued their research on shark behavior, but this time, they made sure to always be aware of their surroundings and respect the power of these magnificent creatures. The beaches of South Carolina are a sight to behold. The crystal clear water sparkled under the bright sun, and the soft sand felt warm and inviting underfoot. The ocean breeze carried with it the scent of salt and sea, and the sound of crashing waves provided a soothing background melody. Amidst this idyllic setting, a group of college kids had descended upon the beach for spring break, eager to let loose and have some fun. Andy was one of them, a tall and lanky guy with a mischievous grin and a carefree spirit. He had convinced his friends to rent a small yacht for the day, promising them a day of adventure and excitement. As they sailed further away from the shore, the group cracked open beers and started to let loose. The sun was shining, the water was warm, and the day was theirs for the taking. They joked and laughed, enjoying each other's company and the freedom that came with being young and carefree. But as the alcohol flowed more freely, inhibitions were lowered, and the group's sense of judgment became clouded. Someone suggested they dive off the boat and swim around in the deep waters below, daring each other to see who could stay under the longest. Andy was hesitant at first, knowing that the deep waters were home to all kinds of creatures, some of them dangerous. But the peer pressure and the allure of adventure got the better of him. He took a deep breath and plunged into the cool water, the others following suit. For a few moments it was all laughter and splashing around, but then, out of nowhere, a dark shadow loomed beneath the surface. Andy barely had time to register what was happening before a massive creature revealed itself to Andy and all his friends. To their horror, they met the apex predator of the sea, the great white shark. As Andy struggled in the water, his body thrashing with fear, his eyes locked onto the great white shark's eyes. They were cold and black, filled with a primal hunger that chilled him to the bone. The shark's massive jaws opened wide, revealing row upon row of razor-sharp teeth, each one glinting in the sunlight. Andy's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to stay afloat, but the shark was relentless. Its powerful jaws clamped down on his leg, the teeth sinking deep into his flesh. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot fire that shot through his entire body. The freezing ocean engulfed him, the salt water stinging his eyes and nostrils. He kicked and thrashed, desperate to reach the surface and escape the jaws of the great white. But the shark was relentless, circling him with the precision of a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Blood seeped into the water from the gash on Andy's leg, a result of the shark's initial assault. The metallic tang of blood filled the water, further inciting the shark's primal instincts. Andy's heart raced as he felt the beast's massive jaws clamp down on his leg, its serrated teeth tearing through flesh and bone like a hot knife through butter. He screamed, the pain unbearable, as the shark shook its massive head, trying to rip him apart. Andy's survival instincts kicked in, and he fought back with everything he had. He jabbed at the shark's eyes, desperately trying to pry open its monstrous jaws that were clamped around his leg. The water turned into a crimson hue as blood mixed with seawater, creating a macabre scene. His vision blurred, his strength waning. Andy knew he was in the fight for his life. He mustered every ounce of energy left in him and delivered a powerful punch to the shark's snout. The shark finally released him, its eyes rolling back in momentary shock, giving Andy the opportunity he needed. He propelled himself towards the surface, blood trailing behind him like a grotesque crimson ribbon. His friends on the boat were screaming his name, reaching out for him as he breached the surface, gasping for air. But the shark wasn't done yet. With a final burst of speed, the great white charged at Andy, its massive jaws gaping wide. Andy's friends watched in horror as the shark's teeth closed around him, tearing him apart in a gruesome spectacle. Blood sprayed into the air, painting the ocean in a deep shade of red as Andy's body disappeared beneath the surface, consumed by a ravenous predator. The sea calmed, the only evidence of the harrowing ordeal being the blood-stained water, a haunting reminder of the brutal power and unforgiving nature of the great white shark. The rest of the trip was a blur for the group. They made up stories about what had happened to Andy, telling anyone who asked that he had met a girl and decided to stay in South Carolina a while longer. But the guilt weighed heavily on them all, especially as the weeks turned into months, and there was still no sign of Andy's body. Julia and Daniel had been planning this trip for months. As a famous bikini model with her boyfriend acting as her personal photographer, Julia and Daniel were always in high demand, and it seemed like there was never any time for just the two of them to relax and enjoy. But finally, they had a chance to escape to False Bay in Cape Town, South Africa, for a photo shoot and a much-needed vacation. Upon arrival, the stunning views of the bay took their breath away. As the sun sets over False Bay, the sky lights up in a spectacular display of oranges, pinks, and purples. The sound of the waves and ripples lapping against the shore is the only thing that breaks the silence, and it's easy to imagine that you're the only person left in the world. It's a place of natural beauty and tranquility, where the cares of the world melt away, and all that's left is the endless expanse of the ocean stretching out. On their third day on the island, as the sun began to set, they decided to end the photo shoot and take a break and go for a swim. The water was warm and inviting, and the couple laughed as they frolicked in the gentle waves, enjoying their idyllic getaway. Julia playfully splashed on the surface, while Daniel admired her from a distance, reveling in the serenity of the moment. Little did they know that lurking beneath the surface was a danger that would soon shatter their peaceful getaway. The tranquil sunset took a turn for the worse as Julia let out a piercing scream, alerting Daniel that something was terribly wrong. He could see the fear etched on her face as she struggled to keep her head above water, and the unmistakable sight of blood starting to spread around her. With his heart pounding in his chest, Daniel knew he had to act fast. Without a moment's hesitation, he dove into the water and immediately saw the cause of Julia's distress. A bull shark had latched onto her leg, and its powerful jaws were clamped tight, causing her immense pain. Daniel could feel his adrenaline coursing through his veins as he swam towards them, fully aware of the danger that lay ahead. He knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to save Julia from the shark's deadly grip. As he reached the shark, Daniel took a deep breath and started throwing punches and kicks at the creature, hoping to make it release its hold on Julia. Every blow he landed on the shark only seemed to make it angrier, and it pulled Julia further away from him. The situation was getting more terrifying by the second. The shark had a tight hold on Julia's leg and was pulling her further and further away from safety. Julia's screams echoed in the water as she felt the creature's razor-sharp teeth sinking deeper into her flesh. The pain was almost unbearable, and she could feel her strength waning as the shark dragged her into the darkness of the ocean. She was running out of breath, and the pressure of the water made it even harder to fight back. As Daniel watched in horror, he knew he had to act fast. He saw the fear in Julia's eyes and knew that he couldn't let the shark take her away. As he got closer to the shark, Daniel could see its massive jaw clamp down tightly on Julia's leg. He knew that he had to act fast and decisively. Without hesitation, he reached out and grabbed the shark by its gills. The creature thrashed around, trying to shake him off, but Daniel held on tight. He could feel the strength and power of the shark as it fought against him, but he refused to give up. With all the strength he could muster, Daniel pulled on the shark's gills, trying to force it to release Julia. His heart was pounding in his chest as he fought against the massive creature. Finally, after what seemed to be like an eternity, the shark's grip on Julia's leg loosened. In that split second, Daniel grabbed Julia by the arm and started swimming towards the boat. But their ordeal was far from over. As they turned to swim towards the boat, the shark came back for another attack, its fins slicing through the dark waters, a menacing presence drawing closer. Julia and Daniel kicked violently in the direction of the shark, fighting with all their might to keep it at bay and make their way to safety. Despite the searing pain in her leg, Julia refused to let fear overcome her. She was determined to survive and protect herself and Daniel. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, the couple fought back against the shark with everything they had, landing punches and kicks on the creature in a desperate bid for survival. In a desperate move, Daniel kicked the shark's snout, causing it to retreat in shock, creating a momentary respite for the couple. However, they knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. Julia's injury needed urgent medical attention, and they had to reach the safety of the boat as soon as possible. With one arm around Julia, Daniel slowly escorted her towards the boat, his eyes scanning the water for any signs of the shark's return. Every second felt like an eternity as they made their way through the water, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. Finally, they reached the safety of the boat, and with a sigh of relief, they pulled themselves on board. Daniel sped towards the shore to the hospital to get Julia the immediate medical attention she needed. Following their recovery, Daniel decided to pursue a career in underwater photography, while Julia returned to her modeling career with a visible scar on her leg. The scar served as a constant reminder of the danger that lurks beneath the surface of the ocean and the importance of being cautious and respectful of nature's power. Francis had seen it all: the stunning views of the San Francisco Bay Area, the captivating skyline of San Francisco, and the eerie sight of Alcatraz Island looming in the middle of the water. He had been a boat operator for the Alcatraz Island tours for a decade now, and yet he never got tired of the sight of the bay and the island. The day had started like any other. Francis had picked up a group of tourists from San Francisco Bay and brought them to Alcatraz Island for the prison tour. After the tour was over, Francis was waiting for the tourists to return so he could take them back to the bay. But something caught his eye. The calm waters around the island seemed to call out to him, and without any particular reason, he decided to take the boat for a trip around the island. The situation turned dire when the vessel's engine suddenly faltered, refusing to restart. Left stranded in the frigid waters near the island, Francis attempted to call for assistance, but was informed that it could be a considerable amount of time before a tugboat would arrive to aid him. With no means of propulsion and an uncertain wait ahead, he found himself in a precarious predicament. As Francis sat there waiting for the tugboat to rescue him and his stranded vessel, he couldn't help but feel restless. Something was nagging at him, like a persistent itch that he couldn't scratch. Suddenly, he remembered the acrid scent of smoke that had filled his nostrils earlier, emanating from the engine room. His curiosity piqued, he made his way to the aft of the boat, gingerly leaning over the edge of the deck to peer into the mechanical abyss below. It was then, in that vulnerable position, that fate decided to strike its cruel hand. Before Francis could react, a monstrous figure emerged from the depths of the frigid waters surrounding the boat. It was a behemoth of the sea, a great white shark, with jaws wide open and rows of serrated teeth glistening in the sunlight. With ferocious speed, it lunged at Francis, sinking its teeth into his shoulder with a bone-crushing force. A blood-curdling scream escaped Francis's lips as searing pain shot through his body. He felt as if his flesh was being torn apart, the shark's teeth slicing through his skin like a hot knife through butter. Blood poured out from the wound, mingling with the salty waters of the San Francisco Bay, staining the once calm surface a deep crimson. Francis thrashed and writhed, desperately trying to free himself from the jaws of the predator. But the shark's grip was relentless, its teeth sinking deeper into his shoulder with each thrash and pull. The excruciating pain was overwhelming, and Francis could feel his strength ebbing away, replaced by a numbing sensation as blood loss took its toll. As the water closed in around him, Francis realized he was in a fight for his life. He tried to fend off the shark with his free hand, desperately striking its sleek body, but it seemed impervious to his feeble attempts. The shark's thrashing movements only served to drag Francis further away from the safety of the boat, deeper into the icy waters of the bay. Francis felt a sense of hopelessness creeping over him. His body grew weak, and his vision blurred. He knew he was running out of time. But then, a surge of determination coursed through him, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. Summoning every ounce of strength he had, Francis reached out with his free hand and groped for the shark's eye. With a primal roar of pain and determination, Francis mustered every bit of strength he had to hold on to the shark's eye, feeling its squirming body thrash and writhe in agony beneath him. His grip was unrelenting, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of the predator's eye as he clung to life with every fiber of his being. The shark, shocked by the sudden attack, momentarily let go of Francis's shoulder, giving him the chance he needed to pull himself away from its razor-sharp teeth. Francis felt a searing pain rip through his flesh as he tore himself free, his shoulder and arm mangled beyond recognition. But he refused to give up even as the water around him turned crimson with his own blood. He knew that his only chance of survival was to fight back with everything he had. With a primal scream of defiance, Francis kicked the shark's nose with all his might, feeling the force of the impact reverberate through his entire body. The shark, stunned and in pain, swam away in a sudden burst of speed, disappearing into the murky depths. Francis was left floating in the water, bleeding and battered, but alive. He knew he couldn't make it back to the boat on his own, but he refused to give up. With a flicker of hope, he looked towards the horizon, desperately scanning for any signs of rescue. And then, like a beacon of hope, a tugboat appeared on the horizon, rushing towards him. It was the backup he had called for earlier. Francis felt a surge of relief and gratitude as he was pulled out of the water and onto the safety of the tugboat. He was whisked away to the hospital, where he received urgent medical attention for his severe injuries. Despite the devastating loss of his left shoulder, arm, and hand, Francis emerged from his encounter with a great white shark as a living testament to resilience and survival. His body bore the scars of the harrowing ordeal, a reminder of the ferocity of nature's predators. Harvey and his crew had been shark hunters for years. They had seen it all: great whites, hammerheads, tiger sharks, and more. But when they got the call about a series of shark attacks in Volusia County, Florida, they knew that this was going to be their toughest assignment yet. 5 people had been injured and maimed, and 1 person was still missing. Harvey and his crew knew they had to act fast. Upon reaching the scene, they were surprised to find that many beachgoers were still present, despite the news of recent shark attacks. Harvey and his team realized that these individuals were in danger and needed protection from further harm. The team quickly got to work, implementing measures to safeguard the people on the beach. With their primary focus being the safety of the beachgoers, Harvey and his crew wasted no time in initiating their mission. They began to patrol the shoreline and the surrounding waters, scanning the area with utmost vigilance for any signs of danger. The crew was well aware of the threats posed by great whites, which were known to frequent those waters. As such, they maintained a state of high alert and exercised extreme caution. The team was equipped with the latest technology and tools to detect and track any movement in the water, allowing them to react promptly in case of any shark sightings. In the midst of their vigilant patrol, the crew was caught off guard when a colossal creature forcefully collided with their boat, jolting everyone on board. Tony, one of the seasoned crew members, was caught off balance and was inadvertently knocked overboard, plunging into the water below. As the crew frantically rushed to Tony's aid, their hearts pounded with fear and urgency. They scanned the waters for any sign of Tony's whereabouts, but before they could react, a 20-foot great white shark emerged from beneath the surface with lightning speed. With jaws wide open, the shark lunged at Tony, clamping its razor-sharp teeth onto his body. The crew's worst fears became a horrifying reality as Tony was dragged under the water by the powerful shark. The surface of the water turned crimson with blood, a stark and chilling reminder of the perilous situation. The crew's hearts pounded with fear as they watched their comrade Tony struggle in the jaws of the great white shark. Without a moment's hesitation, Harvey and the other crew members sprang into action, diving into the water and racing to Tony's rescue. The water was murky, and the shark's movements were unpredictable, making the situation all the more dangerous. As they drew closer, they could hear Tony's desperate thrashing as he fought for his life. Harvey and the crew felt a mix of emotions, fear, determination, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility to protect their friend. Adrenaline was pumping through their veins as they approached the terrifying predator. The crew's spear guns were their weapons of choice, and they wielded them with skill and precision. As they closed in on the shark, Harvey and his crew members started firing their spears with lines attached to the boat. One spear managed to latch onto the belly of the great white. But it didn't seem to be enough to stop the ferocious predator. Harvey knew that they needed to act fast and decisively to save Tony's life. With no regard for his own safety, he boldly approached the shark, brandishing his knife. The shark lunged towards him, its massive jaws gaping open, ready to strike. Harvey, undeterred, jabbed at the shark repeatedly, aiming for its sensitive nose. The shark thrashed and writhed, lashing out at Harvey with its razor-sharp teeth. But Harvey was relentless, continuing to stab the shark until it finally succumbed to its injuries and went limp. The crew watched in awe as the once terrifying predator floated lifelessly in the water, defeated by their courage and skill. With the shark no longer a threat, the crew turned their attention to Tony, who was battered and bruised, but alive. They pulled him to safety, relieved and grateful that they had been able to rescue him from the jaws of death. But Harvey and his crew knew their work was not done yet. They needed to understand why this particular shark had been attacking beachgoers, and if it had done so before. With determination in their eyes, the crew hauled the lifeless shark onto the beach, its massive body leaving a trail in the sand. They began to examine the shark, carefully slicing it open to reveal its insides. As they made their way through the layers of skin and muscle, a putrid smell emanated from the belly of the beast. Without warning, a concoction of viscous fluid spilled forth from the shark's stomach, causing the crew to recoil in shock and disgust as the decapitated head of the missing person rolled out into the sand. The realization that the man's body had been consumed by the enormous predator left the crew stunned and appalled. Recognizing the significance of this discovery, the team knew they had to press on with their examination, aware that there could be further clues lurking within the shark's belly. With steady hands and a sense of grim determination, Harvey and his crew continued the examination. They retrieved other body parts of humans from the shark's stomach, confirming their worst fears that this particular shark had been responsible for the recent attacks on beachgoers. As they worked, they couldn't help but feel a sense of grief for the victims and anger towards the shark that had caused so much pain and suffering. But they also knew that they had prevented more attacks and potentially saved countless lives by stopping the shark's reign of terror. Despite the harrowing incident, Tony was able to escape death, although he had lost one of his arms. Harvey and his crew continued their work as shark hunters, but this experience had changed them forever. They knew that they had to respect the power of these creatures and work to protect both humans and sharks alike. It was a lesson they would never forget. Australia has some of the most beautiful and diverse wildlife in the world. From the smallest critters that can kill you with a single touch, to massive beasts that dominate the ocean. Sharks are commonplace in Australia and notorious for being extremely aggressive when provoked, something that Felix Marsh would come to find out during a scuba dive west of Perth in 2010. Faulty instruction and poor judgment would change Felix's life forever as he came face to face with the power of a massive great white shark. Felix was a Perth resident and spent a great deal of his life in the water, surfing in his free time when not at his job as a construction worker. However, one day, one of his friends came to him with the proposition of taking a scuba diving class, where an instructor would show them the ropes, and they would be able to check out some of the coral life near the shoreline and see what sorts of fish roam around it. Felix was quick to accept the proposition, and they set up their dive to be in the following week. He managed to snag some free time from work, so everything was going according to plan. On the day of their scheduled dive, Felix and his friend Jan went to the beach before everyone else, and they were both comfortable with surfing on the surface of the water, but not so much being under it. There was no one at the meeting place for the dive, but people started eventually showing up, and they seemed just as nervous as Felix and Jan. They made their acquaintance, and they all remarked how they felt safer knowing that more people were supposed to join them on the dive. All in all, there were 5 of them there, waiting on the instructor. The instructor arrived eventually, but he was 20 minutes late. He blamed his tardiness on traffic and a hangover, which set the group on edge. However, He had a friendly outlook and seemed confident, so the group went along with it. They boarded a small boat stocked with the necessary gear for a scuba dive and went out a few hundred yards from the shore. This was a rookie dive, so the instructor only wanted to show them the basics and some of the underwater flora and fauna through a quick dive. After a rather tedious but detailed instruction on how the scuba gear is supposed to work and how they had to behave in the water, some basic communication signals, and more. Before long, the six of them took their positions on each side of the boat and flung themselves back into the water. Felix remembered that the initial shock of the cold water was disorienting at the start, but he was quick to get acclimated and was gliding through the water in no time. He was struck by the immediate beauty of the corals below them and the, at a glance, millions of fish swimming around them. At the instructor's command, they commenced the descent lower, so they could see the reef more clearly. Felix and Jan were entranced by the fish and the vivid beauty of the reef, but they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. In truth, they were fine, as the instructor had years of experience under his belt. The group continued descending until they were a few yards from the reef itself. The instructor told them that they were not to touch anything on the reef, as it was a single massive organism, and it mustn't be disturbed. The group was okay with that, so they circled the reef and took in the sights. After a few minutes, Felix felt a strong grip on his shoulder and turned to see Jan with a terrified expression on his face, pointing beyond the reef. The pair went to investigate, only to find that the reef was being stalked by a massive great white shark. Jan later reported that the beast must have been around 20 feet, which is the maximum length a great white can reach. They immediately backed up and went to tell the instructor, who pointed for them to surface. After they breached the surface, a few of the divers immediately panicked and started swimming towards the boat, but the instructor stopped them and said there was nothing to worry about. As long as they didn't disturb the shark, they were fine. Felix and Jan were calmed by this information, but the rest of the group did not feel comfortable remaining in the water, much less after the guide suggested that they swim to the shark to interact with it. Felix, Jan, and the instructor went for another dive while the rest of the group went to the boat, and with each passing second, the pair became more paranoid that the shark would attack them. But they figured that the experience would be worth the risk. As they approached the shark, Felix thought about how dead its black eyes looked, but they didn't seem threatening. They got close to it at the instructor's command and touched the shark, amazed at how rough the surface of its skin felt, even through the mesh of the wetsuit. It was covered in scars, most likely from previous battles for dominance with other sharks. The shark circled them a few times, and it seemed to be minding its own business. However, things changed when they noticed that it started getting uncomfortably close to Jan, which Felix signaled to the instructor, but he didn't respond. This irritated Felix, who quickly swam up to Jan and pulled him away. This caught the shark's attention. As though a switch flipped, the shark suddenly twisted in its trajectory and made a beeline toward Felix, sinking its teeth into his arm and flailing wildly, seemingly trying to rip it off. Felix's respirator immediately fell out of his mouth as he let out a scream that was muted by the water around him. The instructor and Jan immediately swam up to attempt to free Felix, but the shark was simply too strong. Before they knew it, the water was red with Felix's blood, and they could barely see anything. Jan, who was holding on to Felix, felt his friend float into his arms as the shark shot away from them with a trophy in its mouth. Felix was unconscious by this point and losing a tremendous amount of blood, so Jan immediately started swimming up, clutching his friend by his side, with the instructor following close. When they breached the surface, the rest of the group on the boat was waiting with bated breath, as they didn't know what else to do. But two of them rushed to pull Felix out of the water. They managed to get him on the deck of the ship, and one of the divers went to get some cloth from her bag to tie off Felix's mangled arm. It was completely torn off at the elbow, with visible bone and sinew sticking out. Jan later remarked that it was no wonder that he passed out from the pain, as the injury was so horrific. The instructor rushed to the wheel of the boat and sped them towards the shore, alerting the Coast Guard about the situation, so there was an ambulance ready for them when they arrived. Jan stayed with Felix the entire trip back, which took less than 10 minutes, as it was a rookie dive. When they arrived at the shore, an ambulance was waiting for them, along with a crowd of people curious about its purpose there. The paramedics ran to the boat and rushed Felix to the ambulance, which took him and Jan to the nearest hospital. Felix had lost a nearly fatal amount of blood, so his heart rate lowered, and they barely managed to keep him alive on the way to the ER. He was admitted and had to stay in the ICU for a prolonged period, while his blood levels stabilized and the doctors had a chance to treat his arm. It was a clean break at the elbow, but the skin around it was shredded by the shark's teeth, resulting in nerve damage and loss of function up to Felix's elbow. He did manage to make a full recovery, however, but the trauma of the incident left him with PTSD and a strong fear of the ocean, thalassophobia. He never went into the ocean again, and the only bright spot of the incident was that Felix and Jan's friendship only deepened. The reason the instructor did not act in time was that he was holding his eyes shut through a migraine brought about by his hangover. The diving company fired the instructor and offered compensation for Felix's treatment. The waves relentlessly pounded the shoreline of the secluded Caribbean beach, producing a rhythmic melody that seemed to call out to the young travelers. The sun's waning light cast a shimmering golden hue across the ocean's horizon, illuminating the restless waves as they crashed against the shore. The travelers had been warned of the bull sharks that swam in these waters, but they paid no heed to the rumors. They were fearless and driven by the promise of an adventure that would be etched in their memories forever. The thrill of the unknown was a siren's call, luring them towards the ocean's edge. Their hearts pounded excitedly, and nothing could deter them from pursuing excitement and danger. Within the group's adventurers, there was a young woman named Emily. Her carefree and impulsive nature made her a favorite among the group. Emily lived for the thrill of the moment and was always eager to show off her bravery. She embodied risk-taking, often going to great lengths to impress her friends. As the group set up camp, Emily's thoughts immediately turned to the vast expanse of the ocean, and she felt an irresistible urge to dive in. The anticipation of the unknown filled Emily's heart as she made her way to the water's edge. The cool Caribbean breeze played with her hair, and the salty scent of the ocean filled her nostrils. The waves gently lapped at her toes, beckoning her to dive into their depths. Emily's heart raced excitedly as she took her first steps into the ocean. The warm water engulfing her body was exhilarating, and she felt truly alive. Emily's heart raced as she swam further out to the ocean. She felt invincible, as if nothing could stop her. But as she gazed down into the depths below, she noticed a group of dark shadows gliding gracefully through the water. The shape of their fins and the cold, dead eyes staring back at her made her heart beat. It took a moment for her to realize what they were, but as they drew closer, she knew the truth. Bull sharks. The rumors she had heard about these deadly predators came flooding back to her, but instead of fear, Emily felt a sense of fascination. She had never seen a bull shark before, and the adrenaline rush of the moment drove her closer to the pack. The glint of their razor-sharp teeth was mesmerizing, and she couldn't resist the urge to get closer. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for her phone, the desire to capture the perfect shot taking over her. With the bull shark swimming so close, it would be the perfect opportunity to impress her friends with a breathtaking picture. She tried to steady her breathing, careful not to startle the sharks, as she extended her arm to take the photo. But little did she know that she was putting herself in grave danger. Emily's body went rigid as the shark suddenly lunged towards her. She could feel the force of the water as the predator rapidly closed in, its jaws agape and revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Panic surged through Emily's veins, and she held her breath, not daring to move. Emily's fascination quickly turned to terror as the bull shark circled around her. She could see every detail of its body, the rough, gray skin, the powerful tail propelling it forward, the rows of teeth waiting to tear her apart. Despite her fear, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of wonder at the creature's beauty. But that feeling quickly dissipated as she realized the danger she was in. Emily's heart raced as the bull shark pack closed on her. She could feel their hot breath on her skin and smell the metallic scent of blood and sea salt. Their dark, unblinking eyes locked on hers, and she knew she was in trouble. She kicked her legs frantically, trying to swim away, but the sharks were too fast. They circled around her, their fins cutting through the water rapidly. Emily's mind raced as she struggled to devise a plan, but her thoughts were jumbled and panicked. She could feel the water churn around her as the sharks closed in for the kill. As Emily struggled to escape the impending attack, her screams echoed across the deserted beach. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her lungs burned as she gasped for air. The sharks had clamped onto her limbs, pulling her down with each passing moment. Emily could feel the rough texture of their skin against her skin, and the searing pain of their teeth sinking into her flesh. The salt water stung her eyes, making it difficult to see as she fought for her life. As the sharks pulled her deeper into the ocean, Emily realized the gravity of the situation. She was surrounded by these relentless predators, and no one was around to save her. Her friends on the shore heard her cries and rushed to the water's edge. They could see the sharks circling, their fins cutting through the water. They called out to Emily, but there was no response. The water turned red with blood as the sharks ripped her apart. The group was in shock. They had never seen anything like it before. They called the Coast Guard, who arrived shortly after. The sharks had disappeared into the depths, leaving behind only a trail of blood. The Coast Guard searched for hours, but could not find Emily's body. The rest of the travelers were traumatized by the incident. They had come to the Caribbean looking for adventure, but found something far more terrifying. They vowed never to take unnecessary risk again, realizing that the ocean is dangerous. As Clara and George slipped into their snorkeling gear, the turquoise waters of the Australian beach glistened invitingly beneath them. The coral reef, hidden beneath the surface, was a world of wonder, teeming with a colorful array of life that awaited their discovery. They were no strangers to this underwater world, having explored its depths many times before, but each time held the promise of something new and exciting. With a sense of anticipation, they descended into the water, their fins slicing through the gentle waves. As they drew closer to the reef, the suspenseful feeling grew. The coral formations towered above them, casting eerie shadows on the sand below. As they swam deeper into the reef, the shadows grew longer and the colors more vibrant. Schools of fish darted past them, their scales flashing in the sunlight, while crabs and lobsters scuttled along the ocean floor, hiding among the rocks. Despite their familiarity with these waters, the sense of anticipation remained strong within them. The reef was a world of mystery and magic, and they knew that with each new dive, there was always the possibility of discovering something they had never seen before. But then, without warning, Clara was wrenched from her reverie by a sudden excruciating pain in her leg. She gasped, struggling to keep her balance as she looked down, only to see the cold, dead eyes of a massive bull shark staring back at her. Its razor-sharp teeth sank deep into her flesh, tearing and ripping as it thrashed back and forth. The world around her seemed to blur as the pain coursed through her body. She could feel her heart racing as the blood gushed from her wounds, staining the water around her in a sickening cloud of red. The shark seemed relentless, its grip unyielding, as if determined to drag her down into the abyssal depths. Panic and terror threatened to overwhelm her, but Clara fought to stay conscious, knowing that her only chance of survival was to stay focused, to stay alive. She struggled against the powerful jaws of the beast, her body writhing and convulsing as she fought for every breath, every heartbeat. The world had turned into a nightmare, a surreal and terrifying landscape of pain and terror. As the seconds ticked by, Clara's strength began to fade, and she knew that she was fighting a losing battle. But still, she fought on, determined to survive, to live another day, no matter what the cost. A blood-curdling scream escaped Clara's lips as the jaws of the bull shark clamped down on her leg, its teeth sinking deeper into her flesh with every passing second. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that consumed her entire being. She felt as though she was being torn apart, her body racked with spasms of pain. But even as the shark thrashed around, trying to drag her deeper into the water, Clara felt a strong hand grab her and pull her away. It was George, reacting with lightning speed, his muscles bulging with the effort of hauling her to safety. His grip was iron, his determination unshakable, as he battled against the brute force of the shark. The ocean was in turmoil as the predator and prey battled fiercely in a maelstrom of foam and bubbles. The deafening sound of waves crashing was overshadowed by the thrashing of the shark's tail as it relentlessly pursued Clara and George. Clara felt the rough, abrasive texture of the shark's skin scrape against her leg, sending shivers of terror down her spine. The jaws of the monstrous creature clamped down with a force that threatened to break her bones, as she felt the warmth of her own blood spilling into the water. As Clara's vision began to blur and her strength started to wane, she thought it was the end. But then, she felt George's grip tighten around her and his muscles tensed with a sudden burst of energy. He pulled her away from the jaws of death, and they hurtled towards the surface, as if escaping from the depths of hell itself. Gasping for air, Claire broke through the surface, her chest heaving as she gulped in a great lungful of salty air. She looked around frantically, expecting to see the shark's fin closing in on them at any moment. But to her relief, there was only the sun-drenched sky and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. It was a narrow escape, but they had survived. And as they lay on the sand, exhausted and shaken, Clara knew that she owed her life to George's bravery and quick thinking. Clara and George had narrowly escaped with their lives, but the terror of the attack would haunt them forever. From that day on, they never went into the water without a healthy dose of caution, knowing that danger could be lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to strike. In the heart of a bustling city, there stood a massive aquarium housing all kinds of aquatic life, including the crown jewel of the establishment, a majestic great white shark. Visitors from far and wide flocked to the aquarium to catch a glimpse of the magnificent creature, basking in the glory of the glass tank that contained it. The great white, affectionately nicknamed Mighty, had been the star attraction of the aquarium for years, delighting audiences with its graceful movements and fearsome presence. It had been carefully trained by the aquarium staff to perform tricks and interact with visitors, becoming somewhat of a local celebrity. But on one fateful day, something went terribly wrong. The shark, without warning or provocation, began to thrash about wildly in its tank, smashing into the walls and causing a panic among the visitors. The aquarium staff sprang into action, desperately trying to calm the beast and prevent any harm from coming to the visitors. The cause of the shark's sudden outburst remained a mystery, but many speculated it was due to stress or agitation from being cooped up in the small tank for so long. Regardless of the cause, the situation quickly spiraled out of control, with the shark becoming increasingly violent and aggressive. As the chaos ensued, the staff quickly ushered the terrified visitors to safety, but it soon became clear that the shark was beyond their control. Despite their best efforts, the animal continued to lash out, wreaking havoc in its surroundings and causing damage to the aquarium. The situation quickly became a matter of public concern, with news of the rogue shark spreading like wildfire. The authorities were called in to assist with the situation, but their efforts were met with limited success. The shark proved to be a formidable foe, defying all attempts to subdue it and wreaking havoc wherever it went. As the hours turned into days, the shark's rampage continued, and the city was brought to a standstill. The aquarium, once a source of wonder and amazement, had become a site of terror and chaos, and the great white at the center of it all. Despite their best efforts, the aquarium staff were unable to calm the shark, and it seemed that the situation was destined to end in tragedy. But then, a glimmer of hope emerged, an unlikely hero who would prove to be the key to resolving the crisis. Enter Tony, a marine biologist who had devoted his life to the study of sharks. Tony had been following the news of the shark's rampage with great interest and had a hunch that he might be able to help. Armed with his knowledge of shark behavior and an unshakable determination, he set out to the aquarium to take on the mighty beast. It was a risky move, but Tony was determined to try. Armed with only a wetsuit and a diving tank, he plunged into the tank to face the shark head-on. The shark, sensing a new challenger, turned its attention to Tony, preparing to strike. But Tony was ready. He knew that the key to calming the shark was to establish a connection with it, to show it that he was not a threat, but a fellow inhabitant of the ocean. With nerves of steel, he approached the shark, speaking to it in a calm, soothing voice. At first, the shark remained agitated, but slowly it began to respond to Tony's presence. As the minutes ticked by, the shark's movements became less frenzied, and it began to calm down, allowing Tony to approach it without fear of attack. And then, in a moment of pure magic, the shark and Tony connected. It was as though they were communicating on a level beyond words, with an unspoken understanding passing between them. The shark, which had been so aggressive and violent just moments before, now lay motionless as Tony gently stroked its fin. The crowd watching from outside the tank was silent, holding their breath as they watched the unlikely bond unfold before them. It was as though the shark had found a friend in Tony, someone who understood it and respected its power. After what felt like an eternity, Tony slowly made his way back to the edge of the tank, the shark following him closely. With a final pat on its fin, Tony climbed out of the water, his heart pounding with excitement and relief. The aquarium staff rushed to the tank, stunned at what they had just witnessed. The shark, which had been so out of control just moments before, now seemed perfectly calm and content, its aggression replaced with a newfound sense of peace. Over the following weeks, the aquarium staff worked with Tony to create a more natural and spacious environment for the great white, one that would better suit its needs and provide it with the space it required. The shark thrived in its new home, interacting with visitors in a more natural and respectful way. In the end, the story of the shark in the aquarium gone berserk became a lesson for all, a reminder that even the most fearsome and powerful creatures can be tamed with a little understanding and respect. And for Tony, it was a moment that he would never forget, a triumph that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he walked away from the aquarium that day, his heart filled with gratitude and awe. He couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the ocean held, and what other marvels he might discover in his lifelong quest to understand the mysteries of the deep. Matthew and Gina's shared love for marine life started when they were kids exploring their hometown beaches. They spent hours wading in the waves, chasing after starfish, crabs, and dreaming of the underwater world. As they grew older, their passion for the ocean deepened and they turned their hobby into a profession. Together, they created a YouTube channel dedicated to wildlife documentaries, specializing in sharks. Their unique videos showcased the lives of these creatures and dispelled many of the myths and misconceptions that surrounded them. They braved dangerous waters and weather to capture stunning footage that left viewers spellbound. Behind the camera, Matthew and Gina were not only colleagues, but also lifelong best friends, with a deep respect for the ocean and its inhabitants. That's why when their YouTube channel hit 1 million subscribers, Matthew and Gina were over the moon. They had come a long way since starting their wildlife documentaries together and wanted to celebrate with their loyal viewers. To show their gratitude, they decided to let their followers choose the topic for their next documentary. They set up a poll and asked viewers to vote for the wildlife they wanted to see next. The poll results were in, and the winner was the bull sharks of the Zambesi River in Mozambique. The duo packed their bags and headed to Mozambique, where they met up with their local guide, who would take them to the best spots to film the bull sharks. They spent several days on the river, getting up early in the morning to catch the sharks feeding, and staying out late at night to capture their nocturnal habits. The 3 days of the shoot had been nothing short of amazing. Matthew and Gina had captured some incredible footage of the bull sharks in the Zambesi River, showcasing their strength, speed, and grace. But there was something that had been nagging at Matthew ever since they arrived. Despite bull sharks being known to be solitary hunters, many of the sharks they observed were hunting in groups, coordinating their attacks and sharing their prey. This was an unusual phenomenon, and Matthew couldn't help but wonder why this was happening. As he pondered this mystery, Gina simply shrugged it off, saying that it was just a coincidence. But Matthew knew there was more to it than that. He could sense it in the way the sharks moved, the way they communicated with each other, and the way they worked together to take down their prey. On the 4th day of their expedition along the river, while Gina and Matthew were busy filming at the mouth of the river, Gina's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a bull shark going about its hunting routine, unperturbed by their presence. Gina signaled Matthew to join her in getting a better shot of the magnificent creature, but he urged her to leave the shark alone and exit the water. Gina, entranced by the shark's sleek movements, ignored his warnings and persisted in tracking the predator, unaware of the lurking danger nearby. Only when it was too late did she realize she had become the target of another apex predator. Dread washed over Gina as she faced a colossal 13-foot bull shark with lifeless eyes, realizing she was the hunted, not the hunter. Time stood still as she grappled with shock, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to make sense of the situation. With lightning speed, the bull shark lunged at Gina, sinking its teeth into her neck. The sheer force of the attack was overwhelming, and Gina felt the crunch of bones as the shark's serrated teeth tore through her flesh. Blood gushed out of her carotid arteries, staining the once murky waters a horrifying shade of crimson red. Gina's body went into shock as she desperately tried to fend off the relentless predator, but her strength faded quickly. The pain in her grievous wound was unbearable, and the shark's thrashing only worsened the damage. Gina could feel her life draining away, her vision growing hazy as the world around her blurred into darkness. It was a harrowing and tragic end to what was supposed to be an ordinary day of filming. Matthew stood frozen in terror as he watched the horrific scene unfold before him. He couldn't move, couldn't bring himself to intervene as the bull shark continued to maul his best friend Gina to death. The sight was gut-wrenching, and Matthew felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. But the horror didn't end there. To Matthew's horror, he saw other bull sharks converging on the gruesome scene. They were drawn by the scent of blood in the water, and they were closing in fast. Matthew realized with a sinking feeling that Gina's brutal fate was not over yet. One particularly large bull shark, measured around 10 feet in length, charged towards Gina and bit her leg clean off her body. The shark swiftly grabbed its prize and disappeared into the depths of the water, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The other bull sharks wasted no time in joining the feeding frenzy. They tore into Gina's lifeless, mangled body, ripping off her arms, legs, and head with vicious ferocity. The water turned a sickening shade of red as Gina's blood mixed with the surrounding currents. Matthew could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Within moments, nothing was left of Gina. Her body had been reduced to a gory mess, devoured by the hungry bull sharks. Once Matthew realized that his friend Gina was gone, he snapped out of his shock and realized that he needed to get out of the water before he became the next target. His body was filled with adrenaline and fear as he swam fast as he could, his arms and legs pumping furiously through the water. He had never swum so fast in his life. He pushed himself to the brink as he felt his muscles burning while swimming. Looking back, he saw a fin approaching, and he swam even faster, gritting his teeth to reach the shore. Collapsing onto the sand, he cried uncontrollably. This woman, his best friend, was ripped apart by a pack of bull sharks, and he couldn't do anything to save her. Matthew survived the ordeal, but the emotional and psychological trauma of that incident will stay with him for the rest of his life. Diana's heart raced as she gulped down a lungful of salty air, trying to quell the mounting unease that twisted her stomach into knots. The yacht bobbed and weaved with the lapping waves, as if daring her to succumb to the sea's unpredictable whims. The sun's fiery descent cast an amber light over the teak deck, illuminating the faces of the revelers with a warm, inviting glow. Diana could hear the laughter and music drifting in the breeze, a siren song tempting her to join the merrymaking. But as much as she longed to let loose and celebrate her friend's nuptials, the water beneath her feet stirred a primal fear deep within her. Diana finally let herself unwind, basking in the warm glow of camaraderie and good cheer. The savory aroma of succulent cuisine mingled with a heady scent of alcohol, creating a heady elixir that lifted her spirits higher with each sip. The lapping of the waves against the hull of the yacht provided a piece of soothing background music, lulling her into a sense of calm. But just as she settled into her blissful state, the world turned upside down. A deafening crash shook the vessel violently, sending Diana hurtling towards the edge. The floor heaved beneath her feet. Before she knew it, she was plunging into a frigid abyss. The icy waters engulfed her, and she felt her breath leave her in a gasp. A terrifying presence became known as she thrashed around disoriented and panicking. In the inky blackness, she saw it. A monstrous shape materialized from the depths. A sleek, massive great white shark with rows of razor-sharp teeth glinting in the pale moonlight. It circled around her, a predator sizing its prey with cold, calculating eyes. Diana's heart pounded with terror as she struggled to propel herself towards the yacht, her limbs flailing wildly in the inky depths. But her desperate bid for survival was thwarted by the sinewy shadow that streaked towards her with deadly speed. The great white shark surged in front of her, cutting off her escape with the sheer power of its presence. Diana's throat tightened with a primal fear that threatened to choke her as she spun around and bolted in the opposite direction. She could hear the thump of her own heart echoing in her ears, mingled with the sound of the shark's relentless pursuit. The predator's jaws loomed ever closer, a glimmering row of razor-sharp teeth reflecting the pale moonlight in a sinister dream. Diana's mind raced with frantic thoughts, knowing she had to outsmart the shark to survive. Diana's survival instincts kicked into overdrive, compelling her to fight back against the monstrous creature that had threatened to claim her life. She punched the shark with a flurry of desperate blows, lashing out with her fists and feet to fend off the relentless predator. But the more she fought, the more the shark's aggression grew, fueled by the primal instinct to hunt and kill. Then, with lightning speed, the shark lunged forward and sank its razor-sharp teeth into Diana's arm, severing it from her body in a sickening crunch. Diana's anguished scream echoed through the night, mingling with the sound of the churning waves and the roar of her predatory beast. Her blood stained the water a deep crimson, a macabre dance of life and death unfolding in the inky depths. Her friends watched in mute horror, their eyes wide with disbelief and terror. They were powerless to intervene, to save their beloved friend from the jaws of the ruthless predator. Diana's fate hung in the balance, a cruel reminder of the savage, unforgiving nature of the sea. The captain tried to shoot the shark with a harpoon, but it was useless. The shark was determined to prey on Diana. After biting off her arm, the shark retreated temporarily to the depths of the sea with Diana's severed limb. Diana was in agony, her blood mixing with the cold, salty water. She tried to swim back to the boat, but her injury made it impossible to move quickly. She was getting closer to the life buoy thrown by her friends, and as it was almost within reach, the shark launched another attack from the bottom of the sea, devouring the lower half of Diana's body. The attack was so sudden and powerful that the shark sprang out of the water with Diana in its mouth. The upper half of her lifeless body, from her torso to her head, was visible as the crew saw the terror on Diana's face. Then, as suddenly as it had attacked, the shark made a massive splash as it returned to the water, dragging Diana to the depths of the sea. And suddenly, a deafening silence engulfed the sea. All that was left was a pool of blood and churning water as the great white shark tore Diana limb from limb, devouring her at the bottom of the ocean. All the people on the yacht were in shock. They reported the incident to the local authorities upon reaching dry land. In response, a thorough search was conducted, but no remains of Diana ever surfaced. The tragic incident has shaken everyone at the wedding party, and the memory of Diana's horrifying death haunted them for years to come. Once a beautiful and serene backdrop to their celebration, the ocean had become a terrifying reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface. Julia had always been fascinated by sharks. Ever since she was a little girl, she had spent hours watching documentaries about these incredible creatures and reading books about their behavior and habitats. She had always been drawn to the ocean and the mysteries that lay beneath its surface. As she grew older, Julia's passion for sharks only grew stronger. She studied marine biology in college and spent every spare moment diving and exploring the world's oceans. Eventually, she decided to combine her love of sharks with her passion for filmmaking and set out to make a documentary about these misunderstood creatures. Julia spent months researching and preparing for the shoot. She read every book and article she could find about sharks, interviewed experts in the field, and planned out the shots she wanted to capture. She was determined to create a film that would not only educate people about these incredible creatures, but also dispel the myths and stereotypes that often surrounded them. It wasn't easy. Sharks were often portrayed as villains in popular culture, and many people were afraid of them. But Julia was determined to show the world a different side of these creatures, one that was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and deserving of our protection. Julia traveled to different parts of the world to film different species of sharks in their natural habitats. She went cage diving with great whites off the coast of South Africa and followed hammerheads through the crystal-clear waters of the Galapagos Islands. Her next plan was to swim with whale sharks in the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. On the day of the shoot, Julia and her crew set out with a small boat equipped with all the necessary gear. They headed towards a known shark habitat, eager to begin filming. As they approached the area, Julia could feel her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. The crew quickly got to work, setting up cameras and preparing the bait to attract the sharks. Julia watched in awe as several of the creatures appeared, circling around the boat. She couldn't believe how beautiful they were, with their sleek bodies and piercing eyes. But then, in a split second, everything changed. One of the sharks suddenly lunged towards the boat, and Julia felt a sharp pain in her leg. She looked down to see the shark's teeth buried in her flesh and felt a surge of terror wash over her. She knew that this was the moment she had always feared, the moment when her love for sharks could cost her her life. The crew quickly sprang into action, pulling Julia back onto the boat and rushing her to shore. She was in excruciating pain, but she knew that her survival depended on staying calm and keeping her wits about her. After multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy, Julia eventually made a full recovery. During all this, she realized that she needed to tell a story that would resonate with viewers on an emotional level, and so she decided to include footage from her own attack. At first, Julia was hesitant to show the footage. She didn't want people to see her as a victim, or to focus solely on the sensational aspect of the attack. But she also knew that her experience could help to humanize sharks and to show people that these creatures are not mindless killing machines. With the help of her crew, Julia created a powerful sequence that showed the attack from her perspective. She talked about the fear and the pain that she had experienced, but she also talked about the awe and respect she had for the shark that had bitten her. She explained how the attack had given her a new appreciation of life and had made her even more determined to protect the natural world. When the documentary was released, it was an instant sensation. People were moved by Julia's story and the beauty and complexity of the footage. They were also challenged to think differently about sharks and to consider their role in the ocean ecosystem. The film went on to win numerous awards, and Julia became a leading voice in the movement to protect sharks. She continued to make documentaries and to use her platform to educate people about the incredible world that exists beneath the waves. And even though she had been attacked by a shark, she knew that she had never felt more alive or more connected to the natural world.